On September 15, 2006, an EasyJet Airbus A319 was flying from Alicante, Spain, to Bristol, UK. About 85 minutes after takeoff, while flying over Nimes in France, all the plane's electrical and communication systems suddenly stopped working. The pilots had to fly the plane by hand without help from any of the onboard systems. What they didn't realize was that they were heading straight toward another plane. With no way to contact air traffic control, they came within just 19 seconds of a possible mid-air crash. This is the story of EasyJet Flight 6074. The flight was a regular short trip between Spain and the UK. The flight was only about 2.5 hours long, and the plane carried 138 passengers and 6 crew members. The captain was 42 years old and had a total of 9,000 flight hours, but only around 400 hours flying the Airbus A319. The first officer also had limited experience on the same type of plane, with about 500 hours. The aircraft was a new Airbus A319-100, recently added to EasyJet's fleet to replace older Boeing 737s. It had only flown for around 2,000 hours and had just completed another important flight before this one. That earlier flight was from London Luton to Alicante. During that flight, the pilots had seen a warning message about the aircraft's main electric generator on the left engine. Although the flight finished safely, the issue was reported to the next crew. The outgoing captain told the new crew that the generator had to be turned off and the backup power system, the auxiliary power unit, had to be used instead. Because the return flight to the UK was short, it was still allowed to fly under the rules of the minimum equipment list, which says a plane can fly with certain equipment not working, in this case, one generator. So the new flight crew knew about the generator problem on the left side. At 9:26 a.m., the plane took off and climbed to 32,000 feet. But the pilots didn't yet realize how serious the problem really was. After flying smoothly for nearly 90 minutes, the pilots of EasyJet Flight 6074 suddenly heard a loud bang while flying over Nimes, France. Right after that, the captain's display screens shut down and the autopilot turned off. The first officer's instruments were still working, so he took control of the plane for the time being. He had to fly the plane by hand, while the captain focused on figuring out what went wrong. Their radio system had also stopped working, so they couldn't contact air traffic control. Flight 6074 was now completely cut off from the outside world. Fortunately, the ECAM, the aircraft's system that shows warning messages and checklists, was still working. It gave the pilots a few options to try and fix the problem. One of the checklists suggested switching to an alternate power source using a push button. This might have brought electricity back. But the button was supposed to light up if there was a problem, and since the lights were off too, the pilots didn't know if there was a fault or if the system had just shut down. The captain pressed the button anyway, hoping it would work. But nothing happened. Because the light didn't come on, they had no way of knowing if the switch worked or not. Even though it looked like the radios were dead, the captain still tried to call air traffic control. The first officer also tried with his radio, but there was no response either. It seemed like they were truly on their own in the sky. Meanwhile, inside the cabin, passengers didn't notice anything strange. Everything still looked normal to them. But far away, at the Brest Area Control Center, one controller realized something was wrong when Flight 6074 suddenly disappeared from the radar. The controller tried many ways to reach the flight, but nothing worked. It was a worrying situation. Then, things got even worse. The controller looked at the radar and saw that Flight 6074's last known path was about to cross the path of another plane, an American Airlines Boeing 777. This was Flight 63. If something wasn't done quickly, the two aircraft might collide. The controller quickly contacted the American Airlines crew and asked if they could see the EasyJet plane using their TCS, system that warns pilots about other aircraft nearby. But TCS only works if both planes have working systems. Since EasyJet systems were down, their plane wouldn't show up on the warning. The American Airlines crew began scanning the sky with their eyes, trying to spot the EasyJet aircraft manually. The situation was now urgent as both planes were getting closer by the second. The controller didn't know where Flight 6074 was or what it was doing, so it was difficult to give proper instructions. With no better option, he told the American Airlines Flight to descend to 31,000 feet. to try to avoid a collision. Right then, the controller's shift ended. He handed over the situation to a new controller and gave them as much information as he could before stepping aside. At that time, American Airlines Flight 63 had not yet started its descent and was still searching the skies for the EasyJet aircraft. The new controller urgently told them to descend right away. Moments later, the American Airlines crew contacted air traffic control. They had just seen the EasyJet plane fly directly overhead. If they hadn't started descending, the two planes would have collided. The controller was relieved the worst had been avoided. Inside the cockpit, the EasyJet pilots kept trying to fix the issue. The captain switched the transponder from System 1 to System 2, and it worked. The aircraft's position was now visible on radar, but the radios were still down. The crew changed their transponder code to 7700, signaling a general emergency. This let the controller know something serious was happening. The captain tried everything in the ECAM checklist, including restarting the APU, backup power unit, but nothing worked. Running out of options, he told the head flight attendant to prepare the passengers for a possible emergency landing the first time passengers were made aware of the issue. The pilots debated diverting to another airport, but without radios, that could be seen as a threat. They also had more info for landing in Bristol. There was one major concern. Bristol Airport's runway is short. If the plane's flaps or brakes didn't work, stopping in time would be difficult. They set up for runway 09 left, and the first officer would land manually, rare in modern aviation, especially with their limited experience. London controllers informed Bristol about the emergency, and the airport declared a full alert. Before landing, the pilots tested the flaps, and they worked. That meant stopping on the short runway was now possible. The captain told the first officer to use maximum reverse thrust after touchdown. Attempts to contact Bristol by phone failed, but the runway was in sight. They continued the approach and landed successfully. All 144 people on board were unharmed. The pilots had pulled off a difficult emergency landing without any radio contact. An investigation found that a faulty transformer had wrongly detected a power issue and shut down the plane's main electrical systems. The report also said that the pilots couldn't reset the system properly and criticized the rules that allowed the flight to operate with one broken generator. They recommended that Airbus improve system design, especially the push button and automatic switching between power sources. These recommendations were later made mandatory by the European Aviation Safety Agency. As a result, Airbus upgraded its planes and EasyJet improved pilot training to handle similar situations better in the future. Today's aircraft are safer because of these changes. Even though the landing looked routine, the pilots deserve major credit. Hope you enjoyed the video. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to our channel.